Coogs House. The Houston Cougars are wrapping up their first regular season in the Big 12 Conference, and they got a familiar foe this Wednesday as head to the place where all the magic happens, Disney World. Well, kind of.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a Houston fan or just a hater can't stop by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way, lay out the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. And I'm talking quickly because today I'm joined by Adam Eaton of Sons of UCF to break down Wednesday night's matchup between the number one Houston Cougars and the UCF Knights. I almost said Golden. I'm smart.
I saw that.
I almost said Golden. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Parker. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk this matchup. Obviously, UCF and Houston have had a lot of time to play each other, so good to have some familiar foes and what has been a navigatable year in the Big 12 for UCF.
Navigatable is Big 12 rough.
It's a rock fight every night, Parker. It's a rock fight every night. And I know you all came from the American as well. It's definitely been an interesting transition, I think, as a fan, as someone who covers the team. But it's been fun. It's been a fun ride so far in year one. And obviously we'll talk more about that. But excited to be on the show. I appreciate you having me on Locked On Cougs.
Adam, for the folks that don't know or maybe getting used, Sons of UCF does all sports, post-game stuff, multiple shows a week, etc. So y'all have been covering this very, very closely, right? Since our last meeting, from afar, I would say that Central Florida, or UCF, had hit a little bit of a skid. And, you know, I'm open to being corrected in that, but how would you act like things have gone since that meeting near the, I guess, middle of January?
No, you're spot on. Obviously, it was a tough game, down there in Houston. UCF comes back. They beat West Virginia at home, which was a nice win. Then two tough losses at Cincinnati and then home against Baylor. Two teams that they're certainly better than UCF, but UCF was in those games. Then out of nowhere, UCF does the UCF thing this year, and we somehow just blow the doors off Oklahoma. And again, it wasn't close. And I think at that point, after their Parker, it all fell off. 4 straight losses in a row after that. UCF just couldn't find their rhythm. A bunch of tough road games in there, Texas Tech and BYU. So it felt like they were kind of teetering. That Houston game, I think they were sort of on the ropes. They came back and they fought back against West Virginia. And then they had a really nice knockout punch against Oklahoma. But then they just got laid flat on the canvas for 4 games. Finally woke up recently, but too little too late at this point. So I would say you saw a team that was kind of teetering. They got a little bit of extra life. Fell flat, and now they're trying to get themselves back on the up trajectory, which will not be easy against the top-rated Houston Cougars team on Wednesday.
Yeah, I bet Oklahoma's happy to see y'all leaving the conference. You gave them all a good hand on football. You beat them in basketball. I mean, things are going y'all's way in those matchups, it feels like.
Yeah, no love lost with Oklahoma. Obviously, on the football side, their quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, used to play quarterback at UCF, so no love lost there. It'd have been great to win that football contest. That 2-point conversion will haunt me in my dreams. But it was nice to wipe the floor with them at basketball, and that was a wire-to-wire win. I mean, you end up looking at the box score. I think UCF won by 11, but they were up pretty handily throughout that game. So that was the peak UCF moment this year. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but that was one of those peak moments where you look at the team on the TV and you said, holy crap, like how'd they pull that off?
Oh, it's interesting you call that the peak moment because going into the first matchup, I was worried. Y'all had beaten Kansas at home, beat Texas, who was ranked pretty well at the time. I don't remember exactly what. In Austin, that was the famous horns down game. That, if you want to call it a controversy, I think it was really being a little bit of a baby. But all that happens, and is Oklahoma really the marquee winner? What are you thinking you're taking away from this first season of the Big 12?
It probably is Kansas when you really sit back and think about it at the end of the year, right? They were third ranked, and at that time when they came to Orlando, no one gave UCF a thought. I mean, the first time playing an opponent like a Kansas at home for UCF, our first home Big 12 conference game. So that one will always be special. I think that'll be one where they don't make printable tickets anymore, but if they did, that'd be one where you save the tickets and you put it up on the wall and say, hey, I was there that night. But that was one where, I think UCF, it was just a magical evening. I think the Oklahoma game, by and large, UCF played better, if that makes any sense. I think that was a more complete game. I think the Kansas game, I don't think Kansas played as well in that game, and UCF took advantage of opportunities. But the Oklahoma game, that was wire to wire. UCF just outplayed them the entirety of that game. I think that's the difference. So the Kansas game, bigger win. What is the better performance? I would say it was actually that Oklahoma game for UCF.
Well, and I think it's an interesting qualitative difference because from afar, right? I don't watch them as often as you do. I think most of my listeners are like, "What are you talking about?" But like, they're putting things together more recently. That does make some sense. I've had this theory with Houston. Houston's been fortunate to have some very talented basketball players come through the last half dozen years or more. And they had a pair of guys go in the first round last year, and Jarris Walker and Marcus Sasser. Marcus kind of needed to go, but Jarris is a one and done guy. You almost wish that one and done year had been this year. Y'all are in a very similar boat with Taylor, right? Taylor Hendricks, lottery pick last year, I believe is in Utah still, right? Would a guy like that have dramatically changed this season? I know that y'all had ups and downs. I mean, he was a freshman last year, and there were ups and downs there. Would having those kinds of kids coming through this year have really dramatically changed the outcomes of some of these?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, so shout out to Taylor. I think he just cracked the starting lineup at Utah now, so he's finally getting some good minutes for the Jazz. He was in the G League for a while. But here's the thing. So UCF's gone through a couple of cycles where they're just transfer portal heavy. They'll have 8-9 guys leave at the end of the year, bring in 8-9 new guys every year. So, last year, Johnny Dawkins brought in a bunch of new guys around Taylor. And while they played well, there were certainly opportunities for that team to play better. Taylor was by far the best player on the court. Taylor leaves. I think another 9 guys left via transfer portal or other methods, and UCF brings in a bunch of guys this season. And kind of the joke we always have at UCF is Johnny Dawkins plays a little bit of that money ball Billy Bean style, right? You gotta kind of win in the margins, right? You got to find a guy like Shamari Allen, who's at University of Missouri, Kansas City, and bring him in, right? You got to find a guy like Jalen Sellers, who's at Ball State, guys who aren't in these major programs, and bring them in and figure out success. If we could have Taylor Hendricks on this year's Moneyball version that Johnny put together, I think you'd have a really, really good team, right? I think Taylor just came a little bit too early and Johnny didn't have the right pieces around them. But the way this team plays, a Taylor Hendricks on this squad this year would have been something to really watch for, because UCF is really lacking that go-to guy, that guy that, hey, 2 minutes to go, who's got the ball in their hand, who's taking that last shot, who's the defense keying on, right? We have a couple of nice pieces that can score, but you don't have anybody that you say, okay, hey, it's crunch time, give the ball to 25 and get out of his way. If you had the defensive prowess this UCF team has, some of the veteran leadership this UCF team has, with a Taylor Hendricks, I think you'd have a special squad. So I think he was 1 year too early, or Johnny was 1 year too late, really kind of perfecting kind of that money ball atmosphere. And that's kind of been UCF basketball. Is every year is kind of a roll of the dice. Did we hit 7 this year? On a crapshoot. This year, I think Johnny hit on some really good players. Man, if you had Taylor on this squad, I do think it'd be really interesting to see where they'd be at.
We're gonna get into the Wednesday night's game in a second, but I gotta ask. It's not easy to go find lottery picks, but I do think everyone's paying attention to how well UCF has done in football recruiting. Is there any effort like that on basketball to continue to find those one and done guys? I mean, I would think living in Orlando and playing Big 12 basketball would be a fairly easy sell to a Florida State or a kid from the state of Florida.
Yeah, so there's a recruit that's allegedly coming to UCF. I say allegedly because ink is not on paper, and so I never want to assume something until ink is on paper. But some of your listeners may be familiar with a kid named Mikey Williams, who was a highly sought-out prospect out of San Diego, got in a little bit of legal trouble, got himself kind of out of that.
At Memphis, we know we remember.
Went to Memphis. That didn't work out. He's allegedly going to sign with UCF coming up in the ability to do so. I don't think he can sign until August, though, just based on his Memphis stuff and transfer and whatnot. He was obviously a highly regarded prospect, but certainly some off the field stuff that you have to keep an eye on. So I would say Johnny hasn't really capitalized as much on the recruiting side. And the biggest thing you'll hear from UCF fans is that the key word is resources. And we're in a day and age, Parker, where NIL is huge. UCF's basketball program hasn't really taken the NIL world by storm. I think the football program has, and they've been successful getting players like a KJ Jefferson on the football side. UCF basketball hasn't really been able to reap those rewards. And there's been a lot of conversation amongst fans now, which is college football and college hoops in 2024, which is if you want the best guys, you're going to have to donate to our NILs, our collectives to get those guys. I would tell you the collective game for UCF basketball is probably lagging behind I would assume every program in the Big 12. I know they don't release those stats and those figures, but I got to assume they're lagging behind pretty much every program in the Big 12 in terms of basketball NIL. So I think that hurts UCF a little bit. But you go in the Big 12, you have a winning season. Johnny Dawkins is a big name coach. Maybe you get lightning in a bottle and this Mikey Williams works out, but I would say there's still opportunity to find guys who want to come and play at UCF. But Florida State has a pretty good NIL collective from a basketball standpoint. University of Florida has 2 championships, albeit 13, 14 years ago, but they're still a team that's out there. Miami's not shy about throwing money around. So it's a really tough competitive game in the state of Florida. UCF just hasn't been able to step up to the plate from an NIL standpoint. And I think until they figure that piece out, they're probably always going to be trying to win in the margins a little bit from a competitive standpoint.
We talked about the past. We talked about the potential future at Central Florida. I promise we're getting to Wednesday night's game. But first, if you're in Houston or Orlando and you are looking to get out and do something fun, something away from basketball, just tickets to a game like a Houston Central Florida. I don't know that they have Disney World tickets from Orlando folks, but go to gametime.co or download the Game Time app today, and they can get you into all kinds of arenas for concerts, theater, games, all kinds of different sporting events. Use code Locked On for $20 off, and they'll give you you can click on the seat in the row and see what the view looks like. If you just say, "Hi, I want this row in this section," and let them pick the seat from there, you get an average of 18% savings. All fun and games at Game Time, where they guarantee you the lowest rate. If you find a ticket in the same row and same section somewhere else, show it to them. They'll give you 110% of the difference. Go to Game Time, download the Game Time app today, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Game Time, download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, I get to that quickly because I really do want to talk about tonight's game. And I am excited about this one because it felt like a get-right game for Houston the first time around. Houston, the last time they met Central Florida, UCF, was coming off of a pair of road losses. It was like, this Big 12 conference is ridiculous. They're, again, hosting UCF, but we knew they just beaten Kansas and oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? UCF came in, honestly, had a fairly poor night offensively, made just 7 field goals. I have to ask Adam, as someone's watched them all year long, what do you anticipate them doing differently at home to have a better day offensively?
Yeah, I mean, they're a better home team just by nature, right? They play better in their own building, but they are a streaky shooting team. And UCF has been a team notoriously that started off cold in pretty much every game. So offensively, what you need is a little bit of consistency. There's 2 main guys you have to keep an eye on. Jalen Sellers, who's kind of an off-the-ball small forward / shooting guard, and Darius Johnson, who's the point guard, will have the ball in his hands a bunch. Those are really the 2 guys that make the UCF engine go. If one of those 2 guys gets a hot hand early on, UCF will be in a good spot offensively. Jalen Sellers is a guy who likes to slash the hoop, can finish around the goal. He's left-handed, but he can finish with both hands. He came to UCF as a shooter. We have not seen that happen, but again, he's a guy who can make plays around the rim. He's active in the defensive end, so he can get some tips, some passing lanes, some dunks, get the crowd energized. And Darius Johnson's a really streaky shooter. If he hits 2 in a row, he's going to hit 3 in a row, and he's going to hit 4 in a row. But if he misses 1, he'll miss his next 5. So those 2 are really going to make the offense go. So offensively, it's kind of across your fingers. One of those 2 guys gets going early on. What UCF will bring to this game, particularly at home, is their defense. That has been UCF's hallmark all season long, is they've been a tough defensive team. They're very active. They can switch the ball very well. A lot of interchangeable parts on the defensive end. 2 big guys who will play a big role guarding the rim, and Ibrahima Diallo and Omar Payne. They are a really good defensive team. So if they can slow you down on your offense, right, they can kind of muck things up a little bit, find a couple guys to get streaky shots in. That's kind of UCF's game. And then they get a couple points off turnovers. And that's sort of the way UCF has run, particularly at home. Crowd gets behind them. We're doing this new thing now at UCF where we have palm fronds that we wave in the crowd. So the palm fronds get
the most
working.
Florida, I'm sorry. That's the most
what are you going to do?
thing.
Yeah, no. When you either that or you throw them away. So you got to use them somewhere, Parker. So bring them in the stadium, you wave them around. And that's kind of the energy that the arena has brought in. So offensively, it's going to be a struggle. You're going to need both Darius Johnson and Jalen Sellers to have something going. Then you need the defense to spark offense. And that's typically how you get the offense clicking for UCF, but they're not going to come out of the game and shoot you out of the game early on. They're not going to be a team that's just precision, crisp passes and great shot selections. They're going to do some dumb stuff, but if their defense can keep it in it, then they get somebody that's kind of gets hot on offense. That's the recipe for a win. They're much better doing that at home than they are on the road. It seems like the home rims are much friendlier to UCF than the road rims have been so far. So expect a slow start. Expect UCF to try to pick up the defensive intensity. And if you start seeing some steals, some stops, some turnovers, that's the UCF train starting to go downhill. And that's where, if I'm a Houston fan, I would sit up in my chair a little bit and go, okay, this is interesting. I got to keep an eye. If you're not seeing that, sit back, relax, have a cold one, you're good. But if you start seeing that, then you want to sit up in the chair a little bit, maybe drink some water and take a deep breath and see what kind of night you're in for.
Well, I will say, and I think people remember the tremendous defensive showing Houston had against UCF in the first meeting. Houston did only score 57 points at home, which was kind of low for them in a home game for sure. I would have to double check. It was the absolute lowest on the season from the home front. But 57 is not a ton of points for this Houston Cougar team. Again, Houston also, I think, would describe themselves as shooting better at home typically. When I look at this game, I also see you mentioned the size inside, Diallo being a particular matchup problem. Javier Francis, the Houston center, is long. He's got a 7'5" wingspan, but he is only 6'9". And I think it's interesting that Houston's got this accumulation of injuries, and it hurts their front court more so than anywhere else. Do you see Diallo as the kind of guy, you mentioned his defense, that can put the ball in the basket and help the Knights score more on offense, or is he really just a defensive rim protector kind of guy?
Yeah, he's not a guy that you want to. I mean, UCF will throw the ball down to him, but typically more so to get the defense moving around and try to kick it out. So he's not one that you want him taking two dribbles and making a move in the post. He will try that from time to time. That's not his game. If he's in double figures, it is putback dunks. It is lobs. It is passes around the hoop. That's the way he's going to get his buckets. He's not going to be one to dribble you down on the block and hit a spin over the left shoulder or something like that. That's not his game. He may hit one of those a game. He doesn't have a turnaround, doesn't have a fadeaway. He's going to be junkyard dog near the rim, and typically he eats off of lobs, off of offensive rebounds, or off of somebody switching off, and he kind of slips to pick and roll. That's going to be his game for UCF. So I wouldn't think him to be an offensive threat. I think he's an opportunistic offensive threat for UCF, but he's not going to be somebody that they're going to try to run the offense through. Now, if he's going to score double figures, again, if I'm a Houston fan, I'm sitting up in my chair going, okay, well, this is interesting. Now we've got the big guy scoring, 10, 12, 15 points. That's not his game. So if you're seeing that probably, for a UCF perspective, portends well. But I would have zero expectation that you're going to see a 15-point outburst from Ibrahim and Diallo.
Well, and so if it's not him scoring, I mean, maybe he does score that many points, but if it's not reliably him scoring a lot of points, I think the next thing Houston fans would ask is that, we're worried about the depth in Houston, right? A lot of injuries. Again, it's not a starter, but three different guys that play forward or center have season-ending injuries to this point. All guys that coming off the bench, but really hurts the depth from a lot of perspectives. People are worried about how it's going to play out. How could Central Florida take advantage of that? And frankly, like, Houston fans are wondering, how is anyone going to take advantage of that? But how is Central Florida specifically as a team going to be able to take advantage of the lack of depth in Houston now?
Yeah, I think UCF has to counter that with their depth, right? I'm assuming that Kelvin Sampson and his team have scouting reports, and they're going to realize that Jalen Sellers and Darius Johnson are really the two main guys. So the bugaboo for UCF all season long is, who is that consistent third scorer? Who's that third scorer that you can count on that's going to get you 8, 10, 12 a game to complement what Jalen and what Darius are doing? And that's been kind of spotty for UCF. So the recipe for UCF is to leverage their depth and some of the streaky players they have off the bench to try to counteract a Houston team. Shamari Allen he's a starting two guard, but he plays a lot on the ball towards the end of the game to alleviate Darius Johnson, who is a turnover machine, by the way. So if you see Darius Johnson turning the ball over from a Houston Cougar fan, again, sit back and enjoy that beer, because that probably means you're going to win this game by a lot. But Jalen Sellers, he'll pour into 10-12 a game. And then there's two guys off the bench that you have to watch out for. You have Marcellus Avery, streaky shooter. He's like a 6'6", 6'7" guy, came from New Mexico State. And you have Antoine Jones, who came from a lot of schools. Last one was Memphis. And he's another guy who's a streaky shooter. They both have games this year where out of nowhere, they've put up 15, 18, 20 points, but it's not consistent night in and night out. So if UCF finds that consistent third score, that guy who's putting in 15 to 18 to 20 points, and it's probably going to come from that Shamari Allen, Marcellus Avery, Antoine Jones area, then that's when UCF has a recipe from an offensive standpoint. So again, Sellers, Johnson, they're going to get theirs. They're going to get anywhere between 12 and 15 apiece. You get that third score in the game. That's how UCF counteracts that, by bringing in waves of scores, finding the hot hand, and then hoping that they can ride that hot hand and get some easy quote unquote buckets for the rest of the offense particularly on transition and on defense.
I want to ask about predictions. I want to ask about how this game's going to go and how the rest of the season, because we're wrapping up fairly quickly, is going to go. But first, I want to talk about some finely tuned machines, because I think at different points of the season, we probably both thought of our basketball programs as feeling maybe finely tuned. Certainly, like in the moments after Kansas or Oklahoma, or in the moments where Houston really was rocking and rolling and healthy, I felt that way. And if passion, drive, and patience are what keep your ride or die alive, you got to go to eBay Motors to make sure you got everything you need to maintain your vehicle. You can level up to peak performance with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. Always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride or die every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. All the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. I feel like we need to go to eBay Motors and find some depth for the Houston Cougars these days. All right, prediction time.
I'm okay if you don't, by the way, Parker.
We can wait till Thursday is what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah, Thursday. Go ahead and do some shopping there.
So I got to ask, what's your prediction on Wednesday night? Don't feel like you can't be a homer, but I want to also ask how it gets there. So a little bit qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah, so here's what I would tell you. UCF shot 15% from the floor in the game against Houston at Houston. They're not going to shoot 15% again. I hope to everything I own that they don't shoot 50% again. So I think UCF is going to come out with a better offensive performance. Here's the recipe for a win for UCF. And again, I'm not saying they're going to pull it off, but here's the recipe as I would see it if I'm a UCF fan, right? You're at home. Number one ranked team in the country. First time UCF hosted a number one ranked team in the country. First time they've ever played the number one ranked team in the country in basketball. You're going to have a packed house. You're going to have screaming fans. You're going to have, student section packed out. You're going to have some adrenaline going. What you need to do is get up early, get some early points, maybe 2-point. Houston's coming off a tough road win at Oklahoma, right? A buzzer beater. You hoping maybe there's a little bit of a letdown. Who's after UCF? I want to say is it Texas that Houston has after?
Kansas,
right? So they have a tough look ahead game too. So you're kind of hoping, hey, we kind of fall in that sweet spot between expending a lot of energy to beat Oklahoma, Kansas coming up. You've already got the number one seed probably locked up in the tournament, right? You probably feel good where you are. So UCF fans are probably more hoping that Houston doesn't come with their full energy on Wednesday night. UCF comes out with a little bit of energy, a little bit of poise, gets on them early, and maybe Houston just says, all right, not our night. Let's pack it in and go play Kansas. That's probably the recipe from a UCF standpoint. That doesn't portend well in terms of what I think my team can do, but I think you factor in the Houston componentry there and you say, okay, is there an opportunity for UCF to get up early and play well? Now they have to play well. You can't shoot 50%. You've got to get out to a faster start on offense. Your defense has to be strong. You cannot turn the ball over. Darius Johnson, I'm talking to you. You can't get in foul trouble. If you can pull those things off and get up on Houston, 15, 12, 18, somewhere in that ballpark, with what they went through and what's coming up, maybe they decide this isn't our night. We're going to pack it in, enjoy Orlando, and get back. I think that's the recipe you need if you're a UCF fan, because, top to bottom, this Houston team is better than UCF. I think everybody knows that. As much as I'm a homer, everyone knows that, right? So you need a little bit of lightning in a bottle, a little bit of circumstance, I think, and you UCF to really play at their top level, and Houston to maybe be a little bit below that and a little sluggish is probably the biggest recipe I would think from a UCF perspective.
Well, and you mentioned, I would agree with you. I think Houston's got the more talented roster, but they don't play with rosters, right? You go out and play in a basketball court, and the team that plays better that day is the team that wins. I will say, to me, not just because it's a mathematical upset, the deal here has to be Houston does something to beat themselves on top of UCF playing well, right?
Yes.
Like both things probably have to happen. I don't think that's impossible, right? That's why I'm like not like going all in. I'm not necessarily a huge betting man myself, but I wouldn't put a mortgage on it. This game, I think when you mentioned the idea of like almost a trap game for Houston, though, if Houston wins one of their last two, they win a at least share of the Big 12 regular season title. And I almost feel like that hurts Central UCF because I do feel like had that not been on the line, it wouldn't like you could have easily thrown in the towel, right? But a share of the Big 12 title, I do think is important to these guys. And I'm at least maybe hoping that puts something on it where we don't have that kind of letdown. But Orlando's a long trip. Even if it's more familiar from the American Athletic Conference days, it is a long trip. So who knows? I mentioned the Big 12 title and the aspirations Houston's got. Central Florida has this one, TCU Saturday, Big 12 tournament after. What are their aspirations? What are they looking through as this season's wrapping? Because while the kids maybe shouldn't be looking ahead, they got to play the game on Wednesday night. You and I can. What's looking forward for them?
Yeah, I think you want to finish strong. So UCF's 15-13 right now, right? Again, by all measurable accounts, this Houston game is going to be a tough one, right? So if you pencil that in as a loss for UCF, you're 15-14. I think your goal is in year one of the Big 12. If I told any UCF fan, back in, November of 2023, that UCF will be 500 or above in their first year in the Big 12, I probably would have been committed to some sort of an institution, right? So to be on the precipice of going 500 in year one of the Big 12, I think would be a really nice accomplishment for a school of UCF. And let's all face it, you know it, Parker, and your fans know it. We're not a basketball powerhouse. So if I told you, hey, UCF's going to be 500, you won the Big 12, there probably been a lot of people that look at you sideways. So I think that's a nice goal for UCF. Again, it's not 500 in the conference, it's 500 overall, but I still think that would be a nice goal. So that means you got to win one of these next two, or you got to make an opening game win in the Big 12 tournament. So I think that's where UCF's at. Let's go over 500. Let's have a winning season year one of the Big 12. You're going to have to beat either Houston, TCU, or some facsimile of Oklahoma State, West Virginia, whoever ends up slotting in that first round sort of play-in game in the Big 12 conference. I think that's where UCF's goal should be at right now. I would love to steal one of these next two and make it a little bit easier. But you mentioned, obviously, Houston, number one team in the country right now. That's not going to be easy. And you and I were talking off air. TCU is a really, really tough basketball team. It's at TCU. I don't think that one's a gimme at all. So if you're UCF, I think the goal is let's try to figure out a way to sneak out an opportunity to go above 500 as you close out year one, sort of the regular season-ish, Big 12 play.
Well, and Central Florida has proven, not just because we talked about Mikey Williams coming in next year, potentially earlier, but we mentioned they had Taylor Hendricks a year ago. I think back to like the Taco Fall team. Like they've had pros come through. If they can show like, hey, we're an over 500 team in the Big 12, I weirdly think that the state of Florida and being kind of the only Big 12 school in that region, I don't think that it's unforeseen that they could be a big time basketball program down the line in this. And frankly, I think that's what's interesting about all the American Athletic Conference teams coming in. I remember back to when like Cincinnati had Kenyon Martin, and like that was a great program back in the day. And BYU and Jimmer Fredette, and each of these programs has had their like moment in the sunlight, right? Moment at the top. And I feel like Central Florida could very well be doing that as well. You mentioned that y'all are doing shows regularly at Sons of UCF. What's your week look like? What kinds of things are y'all breaking down the channel for folks that have enjoyed hearing about the Knights in Orlando and maybe want to go spend some time thinking about the sunny world down there where it's a little more beach-like than Galveston. Galveston's is a nice beach, but it's not quite the same. What else y'all got going on at Sons of UCF this week?
Yeah, so you can catch anything we do on either audio platforms, wherever you get your quality podcast. Sons of UCF's there. Wherever you get your videos, YouTube is our chief spot. You can find us there as well. And we have multiple shows throughout the week. We have an audio only pod. We have sort of a debate show that comes out once a week called Around the Kingdom. We have a live show every Thursday night, 8 p.m. on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, where we have guests come on, talk about different things in the week. And then we have a number of videos throughout the week. So we're on campus, we're talking to coaches, talking to players, giving you breakdowns, recaps. You can find all that on our YouTube channel. And if you want even more coverage, you go to sonsofUCF.com. We've got some articles on there. We got some different videos on there as well. So we covered the gamut, Parker. So we're not just a football, organization here, football, basketball, softball, baseball. We cover it all here, volleyball at the Sons of UCF. So we are year round. We don't take the months off. In the summer months, we're doing Mount Rushmore talk and we're trying to figure out who the top receivers were in UCF history, but you can find us in some fashion year round. So go to YouTube channel at Sons of UCF or sonsofUCF.com. Everything that you need, you can find on either of those two locations.
For sure. And again, if you're like me and you're just trying to research people we're playing more often, like it's not a bad resource either. So thank you for coming on again, Adam. That's Adam Eaton at Sons of UCF on, I don't know if you call it Twitter or X, Adam, I probably should have asked, but on whatever that social media platform is. And then the Sons of UCF podcast and all the world of the things they create is wherever you find your podcasts and different articles and things like that on all of the interwebs. So thank you again for coming on today, Adam. I was right. You don't have a hand sign. Correction. You do not have a hand sign.
No hand sign. Our only thing is charge on. So people say go Knights, and you're supposed to respond with charge on. There's no hand signal just yet.
So I did generally rap with a go Cougs and put the paw up, but I also know, I guess y'all are most famous for a horns down hand sign.
Well, no, I don't want. Is Rodney Terry watching? I don't want to get in trouble, Parker. I don't want to start something here. So yeah, that was Parker. That wasn't me.
Well, go Cougs. Go Cougs.